Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Stacked. Today, we have a very, very interesting guest. So interesting that he or she, you'll see soon, is anonymous. First time we have an anonymous guest. I'm very excited for this podcast today. It's going to be an interesting one. Hello and welcome to OP1, the creator of the Logos Operators Collection. Very glad to have you here today. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, it's an honor to be here today. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm very curious, especially to learn a lot about what you guys are doing at Logos. I did a bit of research. I'm quite intrigued, I must say. I know very little about it. Like personally, I've been working a lot on the finance side of Bitcoin, and this is really something more on the privacy side, on the community side, on the I don't know like how to explain it even. I'll let you explain it in a second. But yeah, just to get the viewers hyped, like I'm super hyped and I think you should be too. Let's dive into it. Maybe start by a little overview of yourself. Like what made you an anonymous operator? I'm assuming that's what OP stands for. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with being anonymous in the first place before we dive into like what you guys do at Logos?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's most importantly about me is that I'm really not just one human, but I'm actually like a pseudonymous collection of a group of rogue operators that exist inside Logos as an entity. So basically, I was formed through the culmination of ideas, really trying to answer questions about how do we take really deep, broad ideas of privacy, building new worlds online, ideas that are really radical and really exciting, but can oftentimes be somewhat abstract and extreme. And so developed OP1 similar to the vein of Satoshi, which easily could be a pseudonymous group of people, or, the formerly known or potentially still actively known group, Anonymous, right? Which was always one person. It's also kind of a nod to like how we think about identity. We exist within this kind of network state ecosystem, and within it, there's a lot of people trying to figure out, well, how do I give you a passport so that you are represented in this? And it's like, you know what? Identities can be fluid online. Identities can be whatever you want. That's the entire nature of the internet as it was founded. You can be who you want. You can be one person. You can be multiple person. And one person can be the collection of more identities. I think that's cool because like that kind of goes to where, you as somebody who's been on the financial side, like, why should I not be able to financialize my identity? Why should a group of us not be able to financialize an identity? I mean, we call corporations named after the Latin word corpus for body, and we give them the rights of the individual. Why would we not think any differently about online identities?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, I didn't even know like OP1 was standing for a group of people or like a group that stands for, I know, in a way similar, I would assume, to say how you have companies that are actually a collection of people working together towards something. Seems like that is should be the case online as well, like in the network state. So I get where you're coming from. That's that's super cool. And then again, like for me, it's a first to have a guest like this on the podcast. So super excited. It's a bit weird for me to not see anyone's reaction while I speak, but we'll deal with that. It's funny to just look at myself and ask questions and not get a facial reaction in return.
I promise I'm smiling.
That's good. That's good. I love to think that. That's awesome. But okay, let's dive into this a little bit deeper. You touched upon a few topics already, I think, in terms of like privacy, sovereignty, things like that. Let's dive into the specifics a little bit of Logos. I've seen it's made up of multiple components. Like, can you talk us through what exactly it is?
Yeah, I mean, Logos has two sides to it, right? On one side is the technological stack. We are building 3 protocols that are really in the vision of kind of Gavin Wood and the early Ethereum Foundation vision of what a Web3 would look like, what an infrastructure stack that would support a new internet that's decentralized would look like. And back then, as it is now, it was you need to have a layer one blockchain, right? Then it was Ethereum. You need to have a peer-to-peer messaging protocol, and you need to have a peer-to-peer data storage protocol. And the idea was you could build any generalized application on top of that. What we are doing that's differently is we are adding the privacy to the base layer of all three of those protocols. And so the idea is you can move beyond generalized smart contracts and generalized applications, and you can move into institutions of greater consequence, right? So you can form actual governments online. You can form actual governing entities and bodies online. If the messaging protocol is our mail system and the storage protocol is our vault, the blockchain is then the mechanism in which we transfer value. We have all the components we need in a privacy-preserving manner to then form a politically neutral tech stack to support whatever nation state, parallel society, government, or temporary autonomous zone you want. The cultural side of Logos, and this is really more where OP1 is birthed from, is building really what is the first online digital autonomous zone. And that can be a kind of abstract. What I mean by that is imagine Switzerland meets Estonian e-registry on chain. Imagine an island that has the existence requirements and the power of governments that exist on the internet, that is coordinated by people all over the world that have access to the internet, right? A self-governed territory online, accessible to anybody on the internet, secured by encryption, and then powered really by our culture and our opportunity to kind of advance, right? The way we look at it is, exploration is fundamentally a human trait, right? And when you think about the domains of interest that exist currently, air, land, sea, and space, really the internet is the last true frontier. And so our job is to explore it. And we look back to the early cypherpunks who had a vision of Web3 that was one in which was non-commercialized prior to kind of the extractive nature of Web2. And so we want to bring that back, and we feel we have the tools to defend ourselves in a hostile environment. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin is so important to us, right? It is the inspiration, right? It is the longest, securest chain. But it proved to us that money could exist, money as an institution could exist within a hostile environment. And so we asked the question, what other institutions can we build, and how can we design them such that they survive and thrive in hostile environments?
Well, when you talk about hostile environments, like, can you give a bit more like background or context to that? Like, what do you deem to be hostile in the current environment, for example, that made you come to a point where you said, look, this is so hostile that like I want to build something that is like really giving me other opportunities, other options to explore. You can dive into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way to put it is like honey badger don't care, right? Honey badger doesn't give a damn. The old meme, the old Bitcoin meme, right? Like, the longer way to put it is like Bitcoin's always existed in a hostile environment. It was born into an environment in which, its existence would have prevented the scenario it was built into, and I'm referring to like the financial crisis of 2008, and would have been perceived as an existential threat to those who had the ability to print the money to, and I'm using air quotes, get us out of that problem, right? We used to talk a lot about how Bitcoin was anti-fragile, right? Like Nicholas Taleb's thinking. The point is basically that the hostility comes from the authoritarian regimes who have a lot of benefit from maintaining control of currency, and that the existence of Bitcoin represents a perceived threat. Now, those tides are turning, right? We see El Salvador accepting Bitcoin as its national currency, which is kind of like a punk rock move, right? It's a middle finger to the US and Britain. Everyone in El Salvador's local zone, if they don't maintain their own currency, which El Salvador did, kind of de facto falls to the dollar or the pound, right? And so this is a way to opt out, just like you and I have been opting out as individuals. Bhutan is mining. And so I think we'll see Bhutan, stand out as one of the leaders of the world in the future as a result of staking interest in this new institution early, right? And I don't think it'll stop there. I think just like last cycle, where all of a sudden out of the woodwork, we had billionaires like Michael Saylor and Elon Musk announcing that they had been buying Bitcoin quietly in the background. I think we're going to start seeing more nation states start revealing that that they've been mining or buying Bitcoin for as part of their treasuries in the background. I think one of the things that's concerning for us, and what I don't think there's enough conversation about in the Bitcoin community today, is that the meme used to be like burn the banks, stop the banks. I mean, we were born out of the financial crisis, and we saw Bitcoin as an opportunity to improve upon a fractionalized banking system, right? I mean, that's why I got into DeFi. I got into the financial side as well, because the idea of improving upon fractionalized banking systems and solving problems of, creating financial inclusion was really exciting for me. The reality is I think besides looking at Donald Trump, which I think it's easy to look at how he talks about Bitcoin with a little bit of skepticism, and potentially a bit of pandering, I think cheering for the banks to buy us, looking at BlackRock, soon to be probably the largest individual entity holder of Bitcoin, is probably a risk that we should be considering, right? And so that's then potentially a hostile takeover. So I don't think Bitcoin is ever in a period where it doesn't exist in a hostile environment, right? It's just, are the inputs and outputs kind of like a Corno-Nash equilibrium that it is currently in now, where it can exist and thrive in the best interest of all the other players involved?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I mean, in a way, I think everyone's kind of rooting for Bitcoin to get more and more adoption. And of course, traditional finance coming in, and they're buying BTC through ETFs. And then you have governments coming in and kind of putting some of their reserves into BTC. I think we're cheering for that. But on the other hand, we also have to be mindful of what risks it creates, right? And how, in a way, separated those things are from each other, how we avoid collusion on levels like that, where we actually get that hostile takeover you mentioned. Super interesting to think about these concepts a little bit more. How do you look at identity then, more on a personal level when it comes to this? How do individuals kind of go into this and think about their personality or independence in a way into this, I don't know, new state? Or how would you call it? A new state?
Yeah, I would call it a cyber state.
Cyber state.
As far as things that we experiment with, there is an interest in touching land, right? Touching real jurisdictional places, right? I mean, we are structuring these operators, right, through this ordinals collection that we've built. And so we've amassed a community that will soon acquire these ordinals, and they will actually be operators of Logos. They will be, adding to the vision, adding to the culture, or adding to the technology, right? We've assembled them in 3 pillars. And so with that, we can basically grow and expand any way we want. Where we potentially touch the earth is, organizing people similar to nodes in a network. I think of it similar to an underground railroad, right? And again, I think that's a beautiful example, because talk about a network that was designed to exist in a hostile environment. And if anybody listening doesn't know what the Underground Railroad is, it is during slavery in the United States, there was a connection of people that went all the way from the southern U.S. to the northern U.S. that helped slaves and freed persons migrate to the north to where they would be free and they could have their own sovereignty. And there were people that were risking their lives to house these people, feed these people, and transport these people, such that there was a well-known, safe, but also decentralized passage, right? And this is not very different to how we think about sending packets of information on the internet, right? It's just, this is peer-to-peer IRL in the simplest terms. And I think having those peer-to-peer IRL networks that match our digital networks that are decentralized are complementary in a way that they make us more robust and allow us to do better. So one example is, like, we built a hardware wallet. And so you'll actually be able to store your operator ordinal on this hardware wallet. You can also use it to auth into our dashboard rather than using, there's no Web2 auth, but rather than using like a Bitcoin hot wallet if you want that extra layer of security. But there's an open question of like, well, how do we in a zero knowledge way distribute these to people?
Right. That was exactly my question. I was going to ask you, like, how do I get one? Like, I don't want to share my name, my address, right?
It's a really hard problem. And to be honest, like, I don't want to know your name or your address. And the cool thing is, once this is in your hand, we can host events. We can host temporary autonomous zones, pop-ups. We have community-driven cells in Brooklyn and in Prague that have started out of this ordinals collection. And the idea of being able to access those in a zero-knowledge way with one of these cards is really exciting. But how do I get this in your hand? And I think one way we could explore is kind of building these physical networks so you have these kind of community points that are regionally accessible, right? So maybe they're not in your hometown, but maybe they're within an hour's drive of your hometown. So, maybe there's a local cell in your hometown. Maybe you're in a small town away from the city center and there's 2 or 3 of you, right? And within that local cell, maybe there's 10, I don't know. But then in that local cell in the larger kind of metropolitan zones, there's hacker spaces, right? Self-sovereign, self-sustainable, Logos hacker spaces where people are coming together. They're either renting or purchasing property, maybe we're supporting in some way. But those could be creation and distribution points. And so then, just like packets moving across the internet, now you have a peer-to-peer decentralized network of individuals who could go to these local points and they could collect one of these, like a stack of these, and then go back to their cell and distribute these, right? We're also playing around with ideas of special economic zones, like a new crypto-focused special economic zone in which, we would develop either online or in some supported jurisdiction, a special economic zone such that then all of these hacker spaces could register business within a friendly, non-hostile jurisdiction, just like you would register a business in Switzerland or Delaware, right? And so now you can start seeing that there's a stack, right? That mirrors quite nicely the Logos tech stack that exists, that connects to us from offline to online in a really beautiful way. And that's kind of a vision that we want to see that is differentiated, right? And what's nice about this is it's still forkable, right? It's still open source. People can then move and morph and migrate in any form that they want. What we're trying to do is just kick off that coordination.
I see. That's super interesting. And I want to double click maybe on that, like the tech stack for a little bit. Don't want to be too technical, but want to understand a bit more. So I've seen, so you have Nomos, right? The consensus engine, and then you have Codex, I think, the storage, and then you have Waku for messaging, if I'm not mistaken. How does this relate to Bitcoin? I mean, I get conceptually, obviously, the influence that Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network has had. What's the technical link with Bitcoin?
Yeah, so our protocols are fully composable and modular, right? So there's a number of principles that each one of these protocols is built within, modularity being huge, and also the ability to be able to run on light devices, right? So the importance is that a messaging protocol and a data storage protocol that can be used with any chain is super important, right? Bitcoin is the mother chain, right? It has the strongest security. It is immutable in a way that Ethereum is not, right? There's a lot of value and there is a lot of trust there. But one thing it is not, and one thing that it cannot be expected to be with any reasonable amount of time, is private. And so that's where an opportunity like Nomos comes around. It is proof of stake, not proof of work. Intentionally so, because you can have faster, cheaper transactions than you can in proof of work networks. But the way we see the world is one in which it's all about priorities and value, right? So, for example, we inscribed our manifesto, written by our co-founder, Jeroen, titled A Declaration of Independence in Cyberspace. We inscribed that on the largest Bitcoin block ever, as the largest inscription ever. And it has been the largest since May 3rd, 2024. Why? Because that is our Declaration of Independence. That is our foundational document, right? That is our manifesto. That is a pillar of what we are built on. And we are saying, this is who we are and this is why we are here. And we foresee that other cyber states will also inscribe their constitutions on chain, their value statements on chain, their white papers on the Bitcoin blockchain specifically, because you want that to be there forever. And you know, with high probability that there will be a vested interest in maintaining the security model of Bitcoin. And as long as there is, that inscription will always be there, right? Now, there's a lot of information that you may not want to put on chain. Fees are relatively low right now. It's hilarious because everybody's like, people are saying fees are high. At 10 sats per VByte, right? We're still having moments of 3 sats per VByte. That's historically low, especially for the last couple of years since ordinals have existed, right? We've seen hundreds of sats per VByte, thousands. Maybe not for sustained periods of time, but that's kind of where we're going to be going, right? Especially as ordinals take off, there's new use cases, the infrastructure for ordinals. You're right. Ordinals are going to represent a disproportionate amount of the network traffic on Bitcoin. And that's fine. We support that. We're into ordinals. And these use cases, like supporting documents that are foundationally important to us and our communities, I think is a really cool use case that we have kind of kickstarted for the rest of the community.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of conversation that goes into these documents or these constitutions that you want to maintain, right? So I am coming back to your question. Like how did we get to these decisions that led to our constitution, to our declaration, to our manifesto? How did we get to what arguments were there? What compromises were made? And the reason why those are important is because those decisions are foundational in the story of how we tell our history. And if you can convince someone of an alternative history, you can entirely control them, right? The victor wins the narrative of history, right? We are moving into a world of which the narrative of history will be stored immutably. And sometimes that will not always be economically feasible on chain. And so you will need an accessible, durable data storage protocol like what we're building and have built at Codex, which is currently now in testnet, in order to store that information. And you will need a censorship-resistant, privacy-focused communications protocol such that you can express those. So it's like stocks. You're a finance guy. It's like stocks and flows, right? From economics. The flow is the messaging, and the stock is the storage of that messaging. And then once you have a final product that you feel you want to store into perpetuity, you then stamp that onto something like Bitcoin. If you want to transact privately, then you have a consensus layer like Nomos, which connects those roots. So
thank you so much for that elaborate answer. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think what you say is true. It's you control the narrative of the history in a way. You control what people know, what people learn about, right? And if historically things are not the way that people see how what it is actually, and they don't have trust that what is being shown is actually historically correct, I think then it will be hard to to convince them. But so we dive into this manifesto, right? This declaration, or the root cause, or not the root cause, but the origin of the starting point. What exactly is in that manifesto? How big is it? Because you say it's the largest ordinal, or the largest inscription. What exactly is in there? Maybe in a summary.
Yeah. So the first question, how big is it? It is 3.969 megabytes.
Okay.
And honestly, when we inscribed it, we didn't think we would hold the record for very long, because every week there was a new one. And we worked for about a month, I would say, 3 weeks to a month, optimizing it. Because the problem is, it's there is a cap, and it's not as easy as saying now I have this digital asset, this document, this image or whatever, that's now 10 bytes greater, right? Because you also have to count for all of the metadata that goes into the block. So it's a really tricky game of trying to get something that's slightly bigger, but not so big that it's rejected by the miner, and then you lose the fee that you're paying into it, which is quite large, right? So there's a lot of people that are kind of risking, is it really worth losing this money? For, in our mind, what is ultimately, I think one way to describe it is like a billboard. Another way I describe it is it's for the same reason banks used to be made out of marble, right?
It's bragging rights. It's bragging rights, isn't it?
Bragging rights is part of it, but it's also there's a lot into why banks were made out of materials of quality that has nothing to do with bragging rights. It has to do with instilling confidence and trust, right? And so in our minds, the paying that much money to be on the Bitcoin blockchain is the same as 100 years ago building a bank out of marble with ornate details. It is saying, we are here for the long haul. We're not going anywhere, right? So then to get to the second question, what is in that document? It basically explores three things, right? It acknowledges our current state of existence. It provides a vision for a better alternative, and it shares kind of what our values are as a community. And I'll go into each one of those, right? So the current state, basically the way we see it is nation states and bureaucracies are just fundamentally unable to keep up with a rapidly digitizing world, right? Generative AI alone is really one cycle away from rendering democracy as ineffective, right? If your only method to understand what is taking place with your constituency is through online means, and I have the ability to spin up infinite permutations of individuals with different backstories that are convincing as real people, then you are never going to have any sense of what reality is, right? Within the current state, also to continue that thought, the global elite currently exploiting systems, right? We're leading towards a collapse of the fiat system. I think any Bitcoiner would agree with that. And kind of the dominant power systems, oppressive governments, Western countries that were founded on Western values have abandoned those Western values, and they're beginning to suppress innovation and real progress, right? And we're seeing that as crypto native individuals, right? Again, these hostile environments that we were just discussing that we exist in. Okay, manifesto then contrasts that. What's our vision for the future? Well, we see the possibility to create, like I was saying earlier, a digital Switzerland, right? A free space on the internet. Switzerland meets an Estonian e-registry. I say Estonian e-registry because it is as simple as getting Estonian e-registry. It's kind of a one-click solution, right? We're building the first digital autonomous zone, that space online where we can experiment with alternative forms of government and new economic models. We can think about building new sovereign territories, similar to like Dubai or Singapore, but that exist online. And institutions on top of that are corruption resistant and secured by God, right? So, the third part of the manifesto, like our values, right? And I think this is a very important part, just to wrap this up. And this comes directly from the manifesto, right? Our world is anonymous and not elite. We don't care who you are. We care about your ideas. We don't care about your gender, your race, your nationality. We judge ideas on their merit and value through dialogue. And this is not something we've invented. This is, again, a continuation of an ethos of the cyberpunks.
I see. And no, I think everyone should go and have a look and actually read it. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there that it also makes you really think, right, about like where we are today's world, like what all is happening around us. And I think it's nice to have someone like a project like you that's actually streamlining a lot of these thoughts that people should really look into, I think, for their own sake in a way, because as you say, like being oppressed or like taken for a ride more easily nowadays than before, and especially with AI coming in as well. I think very important to really be aware of all of that. Love the analogy as well with the Switzerland and the Estonian e-citizenship. I actually have Estonian e-citizenship, which was, I think, like I do a very first version of this. I actually created that a couple of years back. I guess obviously this goes a bit further, right? For the Estonian e-citizenship, you still need to apply. You have all your, you have to submit your personal details. It's not the exact same. But so there, I think the path was relatively clear and straightforward on how to get it. My kind of brings me to my next question, like how do we get in, or how does anyone get in? How do you become part of this system? Is this like the exit mechanism that I've seen like promoted in your in socials, or is there another way?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say right now, excuse me. I would say right now, and until the operators collection mints on November 4th, the best way is to go into the exit at exit.logos.co and earn XP, right? XP will help you get onto the dark list so that you can participate during mint on November 4th. But XP will also be with you as long as you are a member of Logos. It'll be an assignment of reputation, but also it'll be a mechanism to acquire benefits and rewards that will be distributed to operators. Having an operator will be the primary mechanism to participate in this community. We look at this as the first residence of this digital autonomous zone that we are building. And so by purchasing an operator, either at Mint or on secondary market, you are joining a club. I won't say an exclusive club, because one thing that we've worked hard to do is to make this very accessible, even if you don't have an operator. So as we move past Mint, we'll be launching the operator dashboard. You'll be able to stake your operator, but also in the future, there will be forums, and we'll be incentivizing these forums with XP, and in the future, maybe things like tokens, right? The goal of those forums are to be a place for Logos to rapidly experiment with ideas and be able to do market research with our existing community, but also for community members to do the same. We had a community member in our Twitter space this week who had an idea for, creating a decentralized, self-hosted inscription mechanism that could exist on a light node, Bitcoin light node, like an Umbral. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. I think I don't want to be the person to say that's cool or not, though. I want the community to say that's cool or not, though. And then if the community says that's cool, maybe there's a mechanism which they can stake, either reputation or value to that. And then if there's enough interest, make these ideas possible, right? So these ideas could come from Logos, like ideas like special economic zones or hacker spaces or, local cells, or these could be community-driven opportunities. So really, we do fundamentally see, and I think a lot of times groups say this as a cliche, these communities are the lifeblood of what we are building. But the reality is, when we talk about building new forms of government, and we talk about governments that reduce the cost to exit and are based on consent, it really has to be, in the realist sense, of, for, and by the people, right? Where have we heard that before, right? Well, Western democracies, right? So how do we bring back those Western values that those Western democracies were founded on, right? How do we bring back, the right to privacy, freedom of speech, the right of free assembly, the right of free association?
Yeah. Can I jump in and ask a question? Like, so is it kind of established that democracy is kind of the best way for governing a system like this? Is it consensus driven, or is it more, I don't know. It's like, because obviously when you talk about governance, like forming a new sort of like state, you obviously have to make decisions. Like, what do you accept as like an idea that actually becomes executed, right? Is it like, does everyone need to vote on this? What's your participation minimum that needs to happen? Will you have like delegates who can speak in name of the community? All these things, like, it's a lot of decisions, right? And I think most of it, to most people, democracy makes a lot of sense. To some people, it doesn't, right? So curious to hear, like, is that like the foundation, or?
I want to be very careful because this could be a touchy subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to preface this with, our interest is building better systems that better serve the individual. So we are not calling for revolution, right? We are not calling for an overthrow of the existing system. What we are trying to build is an alternative that people have the option to opt into in the scenario that they feel like the powers that they control them aren't meeting their needs. So that could be being born under an authoritarian regime. That could be being born under a corrupt democratic institution, say like an island nation with defunct bureaucracies. And so what we are interested in doing is creating networks in which new forms of institutions can exist, so I can opt out into them. Think about, like, coming from the financial side, think about DeFi, right? Or just Bitcoin as money. I can opt out of sovereign money into Bitcoin. I can opt out of the sovereign banking system into DeFi. I also want to opt out of other institutions, maybe property registry. There's groups in Prospera that want to opt out of the hostile regime of the FDA, and they want the freedom to experiment with, with medical advancements, right? That's cool. If a group of people are willing to say that they're willing to risk their lives and they value progress versus what the potential detriment may be that these institutions were designed to protect us from, then they should probably have the freedom to do so. So, like, the conversation in crypto about, like, using Dunbar's law to extrapolate how many people that maximum the individual can empathize with and how representational democracy has outgrown that. And so the expectation that any, congressperson can empathize with their constituency, we've blown past those numbers, and that we need new systems, and that potentially democracy has governed itself, right? I think it's willing to state there's a potential that we've outgrown democracy. But again, that's not a call to overthrow democracy. We are not sitting in the taverns plotting ways to free ourselves from the king, right?
Yeah, I understand.
We are in Athens experimenting, right? We are in Athens and in ancient Greece experimenting, trying to figure out, and that requires the community. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that we have ideas, but we don't have the answer. What we ultimately build will be completely different. What we call upon by establishing and forming the operators is a group of willing individuals that is open to experimentation in the name of a better outcome for the individual.
Yeah, that makes sense in a way. It's like how I see it. It's like it's an experiment to kind of remove some limits from the current system, allow some opportunities with more freedom, less borders in a way, and more of a community-driven approach, and see what happens, right? I mean, hard to predict everything and hard to say this is the vision and we're going to execute exactly that. I think it needs to be fluid, and it needs to kind of live its own trajectory. Nothing is kind of made up like that, right? And then just built like that. I think it's over a longer period of time, things kind of coming together. No, that's awesome. I know we're getting up on the clock, but want to maybe ask one more thing in terms of like, what main challenges do you really see for this? Because, obviously, it's not as challenging as, I guess, having the aim to overthrow a specific system, but it's like if it's living next to it, I think that's slightly less challenging. But still, I'm assuming there's a lot of challenges that come with this, right? What would you say is like the main challenge you expect to face?
I mean, we're up against, a 100-year change, right? Like Logos likely becomes a political movement, right? And so maybe not in the United States because it's hard for third parties to stand out given the winner-take-all structure of the political parties, of the political system. But within Europe, I think it's not crazy to think about a Logos party that would actually capture seats within parliament, right? It's not necessary, but as you organize these people and you organize these self-interests, and you amass a large enough group of people that are willing to represent those self-interests, then you start moving towards, recognition at the highest level, right? And so now you have digital states that exist alongside and similar to nation states. The way these things grow, though, for me is we have an opportunity today to enhance nation states with defunct bureaucracy. And we're already doing that with Bitcoin. And I think it makes sense that the next practical application is DeFi, right? How can we help these nation states use digital currencies? And then how can we introduce a decentralized peer-to-peer banking system?
Absolutely.
Then we can extrapolate into other institutions from there. The next step is then we establish special economic zones, right? These areas where we can then form businesses, right? And so like I was saying earlier, now I can form a business in this special economic zone that is built from the ground up to be a crypto special economic zone, not just one that is potentially friendly. And then we could have businesses that exist on the internet, right? But that kind of touch the legacy system. Then from there, we can spin up any sort of network state, cyber state, however you want to call them, that exists on this parallel layer to the societal layer that we already exist in.
I see. That's, I think to me kind of goes back to finance in a way, right? I think a lot of things are having financial motives. And I think it makes sense to start with the DeFi side of things, where there is already quite a bit of progress, and kind of leverage that to go even further into that, as you mentioned. No, that's been super interesting to hear, and I'm curious to really follow up on how everything evolves. I know you have plenty of things coming up. Maybe before we end, you can share some more venues for people where to follow you, whether that's Twitter handles, whether that's Discord. I don't know what you guys use. Where can users follow your journey, and what can they expect maybe in the next couple of months?
Yeah, I would go first to our Twitter handle, which is exit_operator. You'll be able to find the Discord link from there. You're going to get the most value out of joining the Discord. That's where we're posting updates. Yeah, I mean, that's where you're going to be the most up to date. We do post a lot of things on Twitter, but for the most part, what's taking place directly from us and from the community is going to be in Discord. You can start meeting the community. They're very friendly. They're all there to help other people onboard and to understand our vision and our mission and to become operators. Yeah, and in the next few months, you'll be able to mint on November 4th your Logos operator ordinal. On mint day, you'll be able to go to the operator dashboard at dashboard.logos.co. You'll be able to stake your operator. We'll be forming our first forums where the Logos team will be presenting ideas that we want the community to help us validate or invalidate. We invite all of the community to come forward with ideas that we together can either validate or invalidate. Then from there, we can start exploring the requirements to build these things out, and we can incentivize all of these behaviors. So, looking at XP as kind of as an incentive mechanism to encourage people to participate. I know me inherently am a bit of a lurker online, right? So it is helpful to have that incentive to say like, hey, you're doing good things here. Here's a little thing for you. And then we'll also be explaining what XP is for. Again, it'll be assigned to kind of rewards and benefits. That'll be, day one, operators will be able to have the hardware wallet that I mentioned. We don't like using the word passport because it's analogous to kind of the administrative state, but it'll represent your residency within the Logos community. And really, that's kind of like the connection point the operator is. So as we evolve, operators will have kind of benefits and access that the other people won't. I will encourage anybody else to get involved. You do not have to have an operator to earn XP. If you do not have an operator, the role is a pioneer. We are working on methods where pioneers would be able to earn their way into acquiring an operator ordinal so that it's just not just pay to play. But yeah, again, it's a lot of experimentation, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how this develops and evolves in the vision of the community, because this is, in the realest sense, not foreign by the people.
Awesome. A lot of homework for the viewers to do, lots of things to look into. Actually, I had a quick look at the exit.logos.co, and quite nicely built, even some entertainment built in there for when you're waiting. So pretty cool stuff there. Go check it out. Look, it was a pleasure to have you here. OP1 was a first on many topics that we touched in the Stack podcast. So super grateful for having you on. Thank you so much for joining, and I wish you all the best with the upcoming launch of the collection and everything beyond that. And I hope we can catch up, let's say in a year from now, to see where you guys stand. Thank you so much for coming on. And
let's do it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
All the best. Thank you.